Well, imagine that. Let's check this out a little bit about the destruction that's going on in Hawaii over the last couple months. Let's check it out here.
The following program contains scenes of death.
Hawaii, located in the central Pacific Ocean, made up of hundreds of islands. Only 8 of these islands are commonly known, and just 6 are regularly visited. For all my sensitive viewers, you'll have to excuse my gratuitous pussy shots. But this is how babies are made, which I guess some of you homos might not understand. Now where was I? Islands, gratuitous pussy shots? Oh yeah, now I remember. Dry vegetation brought on by a recent drought, downed power lines knocked out by a hurricane 100 miles offshore. No one could say for sure how it started. But one thing's for sure, the main island of Maui went up like a goddamn campfire. The only thing missing were the marshmallows. Hawaiian marshmallows. Even the meth heads were left to fend for themselves. And a $19 billion a year tourist industry went up with it too.
Oh my gosh, look at the harbor.
With people literally jumping off bridges into the ocean to get away from the flames.
Oh my God.
Run on for a long time. Let me tell you, the God's gonna cut you down.
We've been meeting with community leaders, our kupuna, for the past couple of weeks. And just trying to figure out what we could do.
They're the greatest need of the people, and that's giving them money.
The shuffle of ages feet and put hand on my head. Great God Almighty, I'll tell you what he said. Go tell her long-tongued liar, tell that midnight rider, tell the gamblers, the revelers, the backbiters, tell them the God's gonna put them down. Tell them the God's gonna strike them down. You may run.
We're not getting the help we need. You know?
2 days earlier, and it was beautiful and bustling, and then coming back on the way back and seeing just absolute devastation. It was really heartbreaking.
Hide your head, working in the dark against a fellow man. But it sure has got me the day and night. What you do in the dark.
This is not a safe place to be. On certain parts of Maui, we have shelters that are overrun.
Try to make time with your neighbor's wife. Brother, let me tell you, just as sure as you're born, you better leave that woman alone. You may run for a long time, run on for a long time, run on for a long time. Let me tell you that God's gonna cut you down. Let me tell you that God's gonna cut you down. One of these days you can mark my word. Think her man is away at work. Creep on up, knock on that door. That's our son, you will knock no more. You may run for a long time, run on for a long time.
We have just approved a major disaster declaration for Hawaii, which will get aid in the hands of the people desperately needing help. They've lost, anyone who's lost a loved one whose home has been damaged or destroyed is going to get help immediately.
Let me tell you that God's gonna cut you down. Let me tell you that God's gonna strike you down.
The Vyant Dam and Reservoir, unused now, it once was represented as the glory of Italy's technological advancements. A post-war fuck you to all the critics who said that Italians were a lot of balls with no brains. Conceived in the early 20s, construction of the dam started in 1957. Only 70 miles from Venice, amongst the cliffs and the gorges of the Vyant Valley, Italy's first hydroelectric dam, creating a vast reservoir holding 44 billion gallons of water. And below that vast reservoir was the town of Longarone, with a population of just over 2,500. Established in the Middle Ages with coins, rings, and bracelets linked back to the Romans, and the location of fierce fighting in World War I when the town was captured by the Germans. Oh yeah, and also a location where fat and hairy women carry loaves of bread on their head. Nevertheless, it was a peaceful town. But ever since the filling of the reservoir in early 1960, enormous cracks began to appear in Mount Tauk that towered above the dam. And seeing these cracks, locals started reporting to the authorities that there was something wrong, and often they could even feel the ground moving beneath their feet. And then in late 1960, there was another warning sign, a landslide, and although relatively small, it caused great concern with the villagers, and local scientists were brought in to do a study. And what they discovered shocked them. Because as a result of filling the dam, Mount Talk had literally become waterlogged, with the symptoms of this being that a 1,000,000-pound piece of rock was slowly sliding into the reservoir. So in 1962, authorities lowered the reservoir more than 70 feet, believing that if the mountain did collapse, this would compensate and there'd be no flooding. Providing that the piece of rock that falls is as big as they expect and hits the water at the speed they're guessing, with the government officials confident that any danger is minimal. But like all government mandates, it's not their assets on the line. And no warning was ever given to the townspeople of Longarone. It was on a cloudless Wednesday night at about 4 a.m. in the morning that traveling over 60 miles an hour, 3 times faster than Egghead Science had predicted, that a 1.5-mile piece of the mountain fell off into the Vyant Reservoir. 9 billion cubic feet of solid rock falling into a pool of water. And to put that into layman's terms, it's like that cabaret singer Lizzo jumping into a child's wading pool, making 2 giant waves, the mountain, not Lizzo, and one running up the reservoir and the other towards the dam and the town of Longarone. The tsunami wave, traveling over 35 miles an hour, instantly disintegrated any farmhouses along the shore, eventually reaching the dam, sending 275 million tons of water over the edge, onto a town whose population is just under 5,000, obliterating everything in its path, with most people just rolling out of bed and hadn't even had their first coffee, leaving behind only mud and rubble. Of the town's 372 buildings, only 22 are left standing. The rest, along with the dead, are washed away down the Piave River towards Venice. It's estimated that over 2,500 people were washed away with the wave that morning, with the only survivors being those who lived higher in the hills, with Venice waking up knee-deep in bodies. But in amongst the carnage, there were still miracles. Like a baby 4 miles away down the river, still floating in his basket, what the press named Miracle Tesoro, Miracle Baby. He must have been floating there like he was on one of those goddamn river tours. Which I guess we're lucky for him, because over 500 of the lost souls were babies and children. I guess those Italians, they ain't never heard of birth control. All of them still in their pajamas. Some of them even clutching on the toys. Almost like they kind of knew what were coming. But there were other miracles. The village of Erto, situated on the shore of the reservoir, right beside where the rock fell, was shielded by part of the mountain, and the wave passed right by them. And maybe proving the fact that Italians do have more balls than brains. It was recorded that the firefighters reached the location in less than 2 hours, even though the bridges had been washed out and there was no other way to reach them except for to go through the raging rivers. They still got there. Although by all accounts, there wasn't nothing left there to save. And I guess if it weren't a goddamn mess, better do until one got there. was in November of 1995 that 16-year-old Ruth Wilson skipped off school and spent the day in the library. Leaving at 4 p.m., she caught a cab. The location, Box Hill, a popular local beauty spot. As the cab driver pulled away, he saw the girl standing on the side of the road in his rearview mirror. And although he found it odd, I guess it weren't his business to find things odd. So he drove to his next fare. And Ruth Wilson was never seen again.
Husband notified police that his wife had disappeared.
On that day, it was very sunny and it had been raining.
Tragically, inhumanely, like vigil late last night. Those people come forward.
As to mutilating the bodies of 8 women.
She compared the remains found in the 8-year-old yesterday.
I just said, Mom, like, I love you so much and I think I'm gonna die.
When 16-year-old Ruth Wilson didn't come home for dinner, her parents, worried, contacted her friends. And when they hadn't heard from her, they were alarmed and they called the police. When the police looked into it, they discovered that 16-year-old Ruth was just like any other 16-year-old. Yeah, sure, a bit more of a geek, but she had a small, tight group of friends. And at least to the outsider, it didn't appear she had a reason to disappear. But I guess nobody knows nobody. Oh well. Ruth and her family lived in a quaint village in Surrey. The kind of place that you bump into someone you know every time you go out. With a younger sister, her father was a science teacher, and her mother, a principal. But when investigators did a little poking around in the public records, they found out her mother, well, she wasn't really a mother. She was a stepmother. Her real mother had apparently taken a nasty trip down the stairs when Ruth was only 3. When they did a little more poking around, they discovered that the mother, although she did fall down the stairs, it was only after her neck had snapped, after the rope that she'd been swinging from broke. Which technically, I guess, is still falling down the stairs, except for she was dead when she did it. A family secret that they'd kept from Ruth. The first thing that the cops figured was that the cab driver, feeling a little frisky, decided to take without asking. But when they checked him out, he was cleaner than a nun's asshole. And they figured that he hadn't been getting dicked down with anybody for quite some time. And he told the fish and chip eating cops as he watched the girl through his rearview mirror, he wasn't sure if she was waiting for him to go or she was waiting for somebody. But if he had to make an educated guess, it appeared that she was waiting for someone because she was looking around. And then it had been raining and she wasn't dressed for it. Ruth had an ex-boyfriend that she'd still been close with. And she'd eaten at his family's home 2 days before the disappearance. And he said that nothing appeared to be out of sorts. So they crossed him and the flaccid cab driver off the list. The ex-boyfriend had pointed the cops in way of Ruth's best friend if they wanted any further insight into her emotional state. The best friend, who'd recently moved away, had no problem squawking. She said when she told Ruth she was moving, Ruth broke down and said, "Take me with you," and that she didn't want to go home. And her best friend's mother backed up that story and said at a recent sleepover, Ruth had begged if she could stay. She also told cops that recently Ruth had found out that her mother had hanged herself. And although no longer a secret, she hadn't divulged this to her father and her stepmother. And her best friend also told cops that her friend, who worked at the local music store, loved music, and was a bell ringer at the church, had often talked about running away, but she never talked about killing herself. When cops brought this information back to the parents, well, their lips were tighter than the Velcro straps on a cripple's boot. They had nothing to add, except for Ruth had a perfect life and she was well-adjusted and happy. And although that was hard to argue, the lead detective wrote in his notepad, they'd call it a detective's hunch, but something didn't sit right with them. It was 2 days after Ruth's disappearance that her stepmother received an expensive floral arrangement. When the police investigated it, it had been sent by Ruth on the day that she disappeared. Karen Wilson said she had no idea why her stepdaughter would send her flowers. And if there was anything more to it, she was unaware of it. But Ruth's best friend said, knowing Ruth the way she did, the flowers were a big fuck you to her stepmother. What makes you wonder what happened between the two of them. It was a week after the girl's disappearance that Surrey police organized a more extensive search for Wilson, with a helicopter, police dogs, and heat-seeking equipment. It was then, with the help of 60 volunteers, 4 notes were found written by Ruth, one to her father, her stepmother, her best friend, and her ex-boyfriend. And holding down those notes was an empty bottle of alcohol and several empty packets of pills, leaving investigators to wonder, was this a suicide note, or Ruth wanting them to believe it was a suicide note? After several more attempts with cadaver dogs, helicopters, and heat-seeking equipment, police now believe that Ruth Wilson's body is not on Box Hill, and most likely never was. It was 8 months after her disappearance, police showed up with a warrant at her former best friend's place in Sheffield. Believing that Ruth Wilson was hiding there, she wasn't. And although the teenager took her bank card with her, it has not been used since the day she was reported missing. It was 1 year later, on the exact anniversary of the day that Ruth Wilson had gone missing, that a store manager called the police and said that he believed he'd just sold newspapers to Ruth Wilson. A teenager came into his shop attempting to buy all of his newspapers. When he told her that he'd sold out of some of them, she became visibly distraught. She then left the shop in tears. Calling police, he handed over the security tape. When investigators saw the footage, they believed that it was Ruth Wilson. And when they showed it to family and friends, they knew it was Ruth Wilson. In a 3-year span, there were several reliable sightings by people who knew her well in the nearby town of Dorking, only 2 miles from Box Hill. Experts believe it would almost be impossible for a 16-year-old girl to disappear and not be found, when she's left her bank account untouched, her passport left behind, and never contacted any loved ones. It was in 2006 that Ian Wilson wrote an open letter to his daughter, telling her he loved her, begging her to come home. No one responded to that letter. Several of Ruth's close friends say that before she disappeared, they'd believed she was planning something. They didn't know what, but they believed she had been planning. In 2018, Surrey police gave a review of the case, and they stated, there are 5 explanations for Ruth Wilson's disappearance. A tragic accident, abduction, suicide, murder, or that she had absented herself to start a new life.
Sometimes I cry in the bathroom when all of my family's asleep. I guess I could cry in the bed, but it feels safer over the sink. Sometimes I feel myself crying to feel like a movie star. Make a face like Claire was gonna love me before I die, and maybe they'll love me before I die.
Legion forever!
Well, y'all have a good day now.
Huh? You wanna lay down?